All right, I'm going to see if I can't test my lecture delivery method here and see if I can't keep you interested at 4 o'clock in the afternoon before we go listen to Rick Mercer. I'm no Rick Mercer, so I can't rely on humor. But what I want to talk about today is something that's actually very important, whether you're a security professional, an IT professional, or just someone who lives on our little lonely planet. I'm firmly convinced that we're moving to an age of social media always on mobile. So that means securing our virtual personas is very important. And it struck me when I logged into the virtual reality thing that we have running here during the conference, how much we are actually taking to actually secure the virtual me, and have we ever thought about securing the virtual me? So I intend to go through a lot of material here, and I also want it to be question and answer. The other thing is, if you get tired of me today and you miss something, I really like you focus on being involved. I understand in 2 weeks, you're going to be able to listen to me again and throw virtual eggs at me online. That's what I thought we can cover. I don't know if we're going to get through it all. We'll see how time goes. But I do want to, I'm sorry you can take the profit of the classroom, you can't take the classroom of the profit, or whatever the stupid expression is. I want to talk about some learning objectives. I really want to talk about a better understanding of the risks that come with being online today, and how to reduce the risk to an acceptable level, which means you make the choice. And unfortunately, we do have some ladies here, so I can use my analogy that I used earlier, that my wife actually educated me about when I talked to about risk acceptance and understanding your risk for virtually. And yes, we have great conversation at home. She does stochastic time series analysis applied to crypto math and software viability. So yes, crazy household. And how to maintain the level of risk in 2 areas. Since I hinted at my lovely wife's point, she travels an awful lot on her job. And she says, when we go to a strange city, her and I have different reactions. I'll look for a sports bar to go watch a game and have supper. She actually thinks what's the risk to her when she gets to that city. She'll actually pick her hotel to know that she can actually be safe as a single person traveling alone. We've had lots of discussions on our overall awareness to security and to virtual environments, because women face a greater physical threat when they travel than men do. And it led me to a very interesting realization that when we move into the virtual world, that particular bias changes, but we still have to assess risk. And there's certain people online who just plow ahead. They don't think about anything. There's other people that are very, very cautious and hesitant. Anyone who's ever had identity theft usually gets cautious, or has a virus infection, or has, like a friend of mine did, almost lost his master's thesis because he wasn't doing proper backups. But we'll get into that as we walk through it. So I want to set that up, and that conversation with my wife was really eye-opening. And the whole concept I want you to think about here, that we have a virtual me. Actually, we are multi-personality in our online worlds. And I want to mention that before I get into this. We have these multiple representations. You can be a student, you can be an employee, an individual, and a professional, or whatever hobby or passion that you may have. And you may have, you may be on Facebook with your closest friends. You may have a LinkedIn account for your professional life. You'll be maybe a member of a church or religious group or other hobby group. Or like me, you like rebuilding old Jeeps, so I belong to a couple of Jeep clubs. We all have these different personas. You could also be someone that has, unfortunately, a medical issue in the family, and they frequent websites with regard to that, participate in support groups. So the big thing that we have to realize that today, that our online activities today not may affect our real life in the future, they will affect it, whether it's 2, 3 years, or 20 years. Remember, the internet never forgets. I used to have the Wayback Machine URL up here, and I'm disappointed I took it off. If you haven't heard about the Wayback Machine, Google the Wayback Machine. And you'll really understand what I say when the internet does not forget. So because we have this virtual me, whether that's in Second Life or the virtual, the avatar that we created for the thing for the conference here, we have to manage our risk. just like we do with the risks in the real world. You know, if I'm traveling alone versus my wife is traveling alone, you know, making decisions. Do we go somewhere? Do we do something? Having spent a good portion of life in the Ottawa, Gatineau area, there's certain areas that I don't think I'd want to be late at night. So, I mean, it's just a realization of that. So we all have a sensitivity risk. And risk, I mean, is the possibility of loss or other adverse or unwelcome circumstances. ICT is an abbreviation. It's in my title, but it's also being widely used. And this is information communications technology. This is the realization that as IT professionals, we're actually worried about communications. A good portion of our work is about sharing and moving the organization. You're going to see Engineers Canada start talking about critical infrastructure engineering in the next couple of years with a formal program in that area. And really what I'm talking about in risk there is loss of confidentiality, loss of integrity, loss of availability, loss of privacy, and please notice, privacy does not equal confidentiality, and I'll talk about that, and loss of continuity. And we'll go through those. There's a traditional probability versus impact graph. Some people, I've actually changed the term I'm now using. I'm talking about likelihood and impact. And we have the choices of do not accept the risk or accept the risk with a risk tolerance line. And although we don't realize this, we do it daily. How many people actually stopped at that don't walk signal at the intersection last couple of days, or looked both ways and ran? Or we're on a narrow, Highway 15 between here to Kingston. I'll pick on that for the people that know. And then got frustrated with being behind someone and decided to pass. Or decided, yeah, maybe I can get away with that deduction of my income tax and filed my return anyway. You're making risk management decisions. We do it as a species, we do it daily. But for some reason, when we get into virtual reality, we don't do it anymore. We either assume that, like certain researchers say to me, oh, who'd be interested in my data? And I get really upset when I say no, but the fact that you've got a multi-core, high-performance system that's on a 1.5 gigabit per second internet feed, they may like that because you can probably generate 6 to 8 million spam an hour. So they don't understand that the value proposition to an attacker may not be their personal data. It may be the jumping off point onto the internet. There's a guy called Krebs on Security. Check him out, he's got a blog. He has a very interesting mind map of the value of a compromised machine. And I suggest take a look at it because it really changes the equation. We're not just safeguarding the data, we're keeping malicious types from seizing assets that give them access to phenomenal capability on the internet. Due to a successful spear phishing attack last summer, we had 2 compromised machines generate close to 6 million spam in under the time it took to poison the DNS. From the time we identified it to got them shut down in about 45 minutes, 6 million spam, we got blacklisted and throttled. All because of a nice spear phishing attack that a certain prof clicked on. And his nice server class desktop was turned into a roving spam bot. So some of these examples that we see, loss of confidentiality, your current balance in your bank account, your net worth, not me. I think unless I can put negative up there in terms of confidentiality, in terms of value. Loss of integrity, accuracy of your balances, you may care. Loss of availability, well, if your bank loses your financial records and that's the only copy you've got, or I'll pick on a grad student, someone who almost lost his master's thesis because the backup he had, he never tried to restore it. Loss of privacy, of course, reputation, loss of control of our personal identifiable information. Loss of continuity is the interesting one. This is reputation, trust. and information and capability necessary for disaster recovery. And my example I like using, I'm going to pick on, how long did you say your sister was without internet connection?
4 months.
4 months, Hurricane Sandy. How many of us can survive having residential, right?
Yeah.
Not have internet connection for 4 months at home? You ever read your internet service provider agreement and what they're obligated to provide? How many here have two internet points of internet drops at home? And you actually can buy from Netgear this nice little box that actually arbitrates between the two of them. I'd have a mutiny if we lost connectivity, to say least. So for the sake of a box and another $35 a month, I've got two totally dissimilar infrastructures providing me internet access. And you know what? In the 18 months or so that I've had it, it's actually turned on multiple times. I've lost track. I don't want to get up and have to drive to the university, I'm sorry. It's bad enough I get woken up and I have to log in. But it's something to think about. I did mention about privacy, and I really like emphasizing this. This is a great exam question about I love asking. Privacy is not confidentiality, although people equate the same. Confidentiality, privacy is the controlling of your personal identifiable information. Controlling about you as a person, about who knows about you. Actually, I like calling it control of how much of you gets under surveillance. And when you think about the business proposition that a lot of companies have, I'm sorry, I'm having a seniors moment here. I can't remember who talked about that. The fact that the market is shifting, that people want to have people's IDs so they can actually understand where they're going, so they can target market them. They're actually profiling them. That is where the value proposition from Google comes from, because they aggregate it. And they can tell that 45-year-old people that work in IT tend to do this. I love it looking at the ads that show up in Google. I get an email regarding something and there's 2 ads regarding it. My son is doing a credit counseling job this summer, so we've been emailing back and forth. And out of a sudden, I'm getting all these ads from credit counselors because it's reading the text of what he's talking about his job. He's doing credit counselor for the rich and famous, by the way. It's an interesting summer job for a business guy to have. So people with lots of money are sometimes the people in worse shape. Anyway, we also allows us to control what gets collected and how it gets used. And this comes down to, so what do you think Google's value proposition is? They don't give you that Gmail for free because they're nice. Remember, the primary value of a corporation is to increase the wealth of the shareholder. Business 101. They have to be making money somehow to give you the free service. And we seem to forget that. Same with Facebook, same with any of these massive systems that provide free. They are data mining you. And as we found out, it looks like the US government is data mining you too. I wonder where all the investment capital came from for cloud services. No, I won't go there. I have a question. How many people use the same small subset of passwords between multiple systems? Come on, be honest. So, they hack one system and they can figure out what your ID is on other systems. Guess what they've just done? To put it in hackerdom, they own you. We did something at the U of S that I love. We took our password hash file. It's actually 170,000 passwords long, and I only could get access to our new a low-cost graphic processor built scientific computer. It's a box that's got, I think, 48 graphics coprocessors from NVIDIA in it, something like that. We put open source rainbow table lookup software on it, and in 48 hours, we had 87,000 of those passwords cracked. Scary thing is the same 20 passwords are used by over 3,700 accounts. It's scary, and these met our password strength guidelines. And I learned an awful lot about how people pick passwords. You know what the U of S mascot is? the husky. It really taught me an awful lot about password strength and the realization that the best thing to do is not reuse them and to go to two-factor authentication and kind of grow it. But I think I have to wait for some administrators to retire before we'll succeed in getting that rolled out. But this comes up with how strong are your passwords. You know, I put some guidelines up there. I put 10 characters long. The current research is out is actually going to have to be 14 characters before you get the work factor number to be where it should be. One thing I'm really keen on is don't use 0, O, I, L, or 1. Putting a negative set on your password capability actually helps the strength. These are just, hard to write down. The other thing I recommend, because the number of passwords is increasing, this is password safe. I'm a fan of password safe because Bruce Schneier developed it. Unlike some password storage things that are on smartphones, it actually does encrypt your passwords. You can actually download the source code. It's open source. It's up on SourceForge. If you really are paranoid, like some people I know, you can compile it yourself. It hooks up to something called YubiKey, which I suggest you take a look at. It's a little device for storing your passwords. It supports multiple platforms. I hate the Android version. The PC and the Mac one are pretty good. I've got no experience with the iPhone and the iPad version. This means I've now I think at last count, I had close to 300 passwords in this system. They're encrypted using a massively long passphrase. It's very easy for me to remember. Each one is unique. Each one's, I think I've got it at 14 characters and quite complicated. So if I have a compromise, at best I'm losing one password. Now it brings up an issue is how do I save my password safe file and how do I back it up and archive it to make sure I don't lose it? But that is something that I have to come up with a procedure to do. The other thing is to consider two-factor authentication. Even Twitter I put Twitter up here as in planning. They have now got it available. The Google one has got some advantages, and I kind of like their implementation. Microsoft's one I haven't had an experience with. Facebook I've had nothing but problems since trying to turn it off and on. And I think the problem is between chair and computer. A picnic problem. Person in chair, not in problem in chair, not in computer. Come on, guys, it's not that bad. So I'm a big fan of this because it could be a code generated by the mobile phone or sent to the mobile phone by SMS or by a voice call. You go to log in, you log in, it rings you back, and it either asks you to key something or it dictates a 4-digit number for you to type. Totally moves you into the fact that if anyone's going to go after you, it's got to be a national intelligence agency, which I think is a little bit better than, a script kiddie. The other thing to do, how many people actually check before they type a password whether the website is encrypted? And are you sure, is it really encrypted? Or just rewriting the URL? There is an option on some newer websites that actually pop up a keyboard on the website. So that ensures that you have no keyboard sniffer able to catch the keyboard keystrokes. Now, you see, we're getting into the paranoia space here. But at least take a look at that, check the certificate, make sure you're encrypting the password. Another thing is, I love walking around the university. I could have sent an email from the provo the other day. In talking to his secretary, she says, "Oh, go ahead, Lawrence, he'll be in." Machine's logged on right in front of me. Makes me wonder. So, log off from the computer if you're going to be away from the keyboard, even from a short period of time. It's a hard discipline to get into, but it is very critical. See, I told you this stuff was kind of entertaining, but okay, I can. Before I joined U of S, I was working for an Indian consulting company, and I was traveling an awful lot in the US. I can tell you McDonald's hotspots are fantastic when you're on the road. Those type of free wireless hotspots are everywhere. We're actually finding that large Canadian carriers want to buy large enterprises, wireless infrastructure, because they want to start managing and providing the service so you have a large campus for obvious reasons. They're everywhere. Besides the honest users and hosts, actually the one I'm interested in playing with is the first airplane I hit with one. And maybe do drive-by hacking on the airplane while people are logging in from the sea. Reminds me of the Air France attack on the Nortel executives in business class a few years ago, but I'm dating myself. But they attract an awful lot of malicious users as well. Better ones use WPA or WPA2. So you really have to understand the risk of using WEP or no security. But there is a phenomenal free Canadian web proxy. You go there, buy an SSL connection that you trust, because of cyber tracks, and then you use that point to grow to the web. And that means you can browse unencrypted sites. And it also means, for example, if you pick a US proxy, you can actually watch US Netflix on your laptop. It'll accomplish the same thing. You actually can mask where you are geographically. The cyber tracks one, though, specifically for unencrypted websites when you're dealing with service providers that don't encrypt their website, or you've got worries that their SSL is not up to speed and you want to make sure you safeguard your password. So, how many people have wireless home access points? Everybody? They're not very secure. There's a whole bunch of non-patched old Linux vulnerabilities and everything else floating on out there. But be very careful of the security settings that are out of the box. If you actually take the time to read to see how it's set up, it may really scare you. I know someone found out very quickly that he went over their monthly allotment very quickly after he plugged in his new ISP. He plugged in his new access point. Some ISPs actually offer they actually manage the access point and router for you. There was a cooperative ISP in Saskatchewan called Access Comms. They don't give you the key that they put on your access port for their ISP. They put on a very long key. They provide you a web portal to do it. But they still don't provide you the management key. And they found by doing that, they've cut down the illicit use of their access points tremendously. And they've actually done the business case. It's cheaper to do that for people rather than fight the problems of unmanaged access points. Hey, first internet service provider that I've dealt with that they don't cap anything. They're wide open. And talking to the guy, he says, we don't need to. We don't have to throttle people because we manage their access points. It's an interesting discussion, but it is a cooperative. And if you know Saskatchewan, it's the home of cooperatives. You know, farmers can't get internet, they'll put in their own infrastructure, resulting access communications. Other things, don't broadcast your SSID. I do, but don't. Select the maximum length key. Don't you like that nice random key? That came off an internet-based WPA key generator. And then you use the protocol on board where you can say, you know, pass the key. There's the exchange protocol where you click the button on the new device and you click you click the button on the device, you click the button in Windows or an Apple, and it negotiates the security association so you don't have to type in the horribly long key. And that'll put you into a totally different thing. I have some great entertainment. I still have the house here in Ottawa, and there is some local script kiddie that likes beating up my good access point. I wish I had the time to put a honeypot in, but you can tell because it ends up being a denial of service attack. And when I looked at the traffic, he was sitting there and he's trying, it's a dictionary style multiple attack. I wonder why. Anyway, we won't question. Huh?
You can't be too far.
Well, yeah, if I had time, I'd go a little bit looking for it, but it's someone that's bored, obviously. And the main reason I have that problem is I've got a couple of devices that I can't hide the SSID. They can't log in unless they can see the SSID. So, also, anti-malware and desktop firewalls. Can't emphasize how critical these are. There are lots of options on the market, but read the reviews. It's always changing who's in the lead. And the one I'm using right now, which is Bitdefender, actually tells me if the link is good or bad. And it's amazing the number of drive-by hacks that it blocks. You know, I click it, and it comes up and says, we've detected this malware on this site. And sometimes they're very reputable sites. And I'm beginning to get very, very worried about this drive-by thing, and that's where just by going to the site, you've injected yourself with malware. So it really demonstrates the need. Also, a question I asked earlier today is how many people have antivirus or firewalls on their smartphone or mobile device? No one? Really? Because there is a couple of very good freeware ones that are very, very good. Because there's an awful lot more malware that's targeting this, and if I'm going to go after an enterprise, I'm going to go after this. I'm not, it's a Trojan horse, walks inside, it's protected, it's connected to the network. If you have some time and you want to scare yourself, Google Dreamcast Phone Home from the early 2000s Black Hat Conference. Dreamcast was a game console made by Sega. You remember Sega? Yeah. Great thing about that, you didn't have to jailbreak it to run Linux. It came with a 10BASE-T Ethernet port, and it would run headless without computer and monitor. And you used to be able to get them for about $20 to $30 at garage sales. The attack is you take it, put double-side sticky tape on, walk into a boardroom table, put it underneath, plug it into the network, and leave. The software they provide then tunnels out via port 80 to home, and it sets up a SSL connection on 443 and attacks your network from the inside. One of the best presentations I've ever seen at Black Hat, so Dreamcast Phone Home. Fast forward today, there's a thing called Raspberry Pi. I took a look at it. I figured it'd be a great third-year student job to port it, the software. And that means I have a little throwaway $30 computer that I could walk into any enterprise with a little bit of modification to the Raspberry Pi to run it off power over Ethernet, put it under the table, jack it in, and leave. So that's the environment that we're moving into. Notice I used to talk about backups. I don't. I now call them systems restoration. How many people back up their systems in here routinely? Okay, for the people that back up their systems, have you ever tried a recovery? Has it worked? Great. A lot of times, people have never tried it until... Pardon? Exactly. One of the best pieces of software that Microsoft sold, they no longer make because people wouldn't buy it, was the Microsoft Home Server. It had a phenomenal backup protocol and compression algorithm in it that would back up the 10 systems into a very tight, it would only back up, if it detected the same sector amongst the 10 systems, it would only keep one copy of the sector. Unfortunately, you've got to be, all backup systems aren't created equal. Some of them are very good, but whatever it is, test it. And that leads us to the question is, by the way, if you're backing up into the cloud, so where is your data? What do you have in there? Do you really care about whether it's looked at by someone? What happens if it gets modified and you run a small business and CRA is showing up and suddenly you find out the data is not accurate anymore? Does that matter? So where is my data? Think about it. I have a friend in business that has partnered with another business company and they do a mirror image across some sites. Because that way, they don't compete, but they trust to hold each other's backups. Think about how you do it, because One of these days, you're going to need it. I make a bet there's lots of, this is the other thing that came out of the Superstorm Sandy. Two things killed small business in Superstorm Sandy. How quickly they got back on the internet, especially if they're using cloud services, and where was their data? Rich cloud-based storage. It's really interesting. The university that I'm doing my doctorate with, the thing is, if I use Microsoft SkyDrive or Microsoft falls over, they'll take them into consideration deciding whether I get my degree or not if my dissertation goes poof. I think they're pretty good. As long as I keep an updated copy on Microsoft SkyDrive, I don't think it's going to go poof. But we still even have a protocol. Like I have to email it to my supervisor recruiting once a month. We actually have a protocol because we've had a couple of people that have had 6-7 months worth of work almost go. You'd be surprised if you asked your 3rd and 4th year students and your master's students and your doctorate students, where is their data? What would happen if they lost it? It's a scary question to ask students. The big thing is understanding the gate agreement with these storage options, because I'm paranoid, so I use SkyDrive and Google Drive. It's duplicated. I don't think both of them will go under. If they do, maybe I really shouldn't worry about it, but Again, know where your data is, know what your risk tolerance is. The next one is one I've dealt with myself personally at the university to deal with residences. And for those people that are a member of the Cusio security SIG, there was a beautiful website posted that you could go in and look at universities for unsecured webcams. I did my undergrad at Dow, and I click on it, and I'm going, I know that corner. There was one of a machine shop with this, obviously a security cam. And that's been taken off, but this is another one. But this is unsuitable for work. And it just amazes me the number of hacked webcams that are out there, A, or B, people that have put webcams on the network without securing it. I've actually scared people on this. This is great feedback as a security professional. I gave this presentation to a bunch of faculty members at U of S, and I happened to be in another meeting, and you wouldn't believe the colors of vinyl tape that are over their webcams. So they listened. And it's becoming a serious problem. I have a machine at home that I'm really, really wondering about if it's compromised, because during the boot phase, it has a little light for the camera that turns on, then it shuts off. So I've got it taped now, and I got to do a go looking, because it shouldn't be doing that. But it's just one of these little issues. The case that I was aware of in residences was sitting on someone's student's desk in the residence dorm room, and you can just understand the potential difficulty that got created because of the machine being hacked. A little while ago, I spent a whole bunch of time talking about BYOD, but I really want to emphasize here in terms of securing the virtual me, this is a major disruptive technology. That's what the business school types cause, something that caused a major change in the way we do things. Invention of the iPhone was a disruptive technology. Apple has done a whole bunch of these where they totally changed the environment. The World Wide Web in about 95, 96 was one. You can actually go back and mark when these, hard right turns occurred during the technology. Bring your own devices, mapping that, consumerization of electronics and availability. That goes along with the fact that our traditional hard boundaries in the organization are gone. And cloud computing, well, just got to go read CNN, and you can see all you want about the arguments of cloud computing and personal security and liberties and freedom and fighting terrorism. I've got two quotes. First one from Benjamin Franklin is, when you sacrifice liberty for safety, you have neither. There's a Helen Keller one, which I always have trouble remembering, but it's along the same lines, that when you pursue security, you do not have life effectively. And Helen Keller was extremely insightful to realize that she had to take massive risk to live. So when you think about that, you have to ask those questions. So I'm going to do, perfect. Takeaways. You really have to understand what your own risk tolerance is. That goes back to my wife and I traveling, while we have different risk tolerances. If you ever flown with airlines in certain countries, you definitely have to have a low risk tolerance. Make a decision when you look at things. You got to come up with a set of basic security controls that you follow to protect your virtual me. How do you do data backups? I'm actually about to go to a hardened machine that I do my online banking from, and I only do it from one machine. Probably to be on a Linux box, so that really cut down my possibility. I have a daughter that's doing visual design and fine arts. I seem to be getting handoff of laptops that are Apple-based. Maybe I'll pick one of those. Again, something that's not mainstream, so it's not attracting attention. Understand that you have more than one virtual me. Understand the safeguards that need to be in place. Understand that. Be brave to Google yourself someday just to see what's out there. Might shock you. And then when you do that, you'll go out and say, how come people still ask one of my security questions is my mother's maiden name? Because if you got a family member that's big on Ancestry.ca, you may find out that the world knows what your mother's maiden name is. Backup. Sorry, restoration, save the data and test it. Antivirus software, that's a non-starter point. Desktop firewall, also very important. And passwords, reuse complexity and how often you change them. If you can go to multi-factor authentication, whether it doesn't work as well as you'd like it and there's problems with it, it's still better than using the two-factor with the password generator or however you do than just having a password. And anyway, I hope that's been at least a little entertaining and not too dry for the last presentation. Any questions? Oh, realistically, okay, your example, the Provo happens everywhere. But when you explain the severity of this, they glaze over. How can you realistically convince them? Actually, at the University of Saskatchewan, I have this problem less and less. So I'm going to give a biased answer. They want metrics from me. And out of a sudden, the metrics are starting to scare them. When I tell them that there's 87 passwords, took us 48 hours, and 3,200 were the same, they understand that. When I tell them that we've lost email connectivity, I think we're up to 18 hours since January, and we've been blacklisted, they understand that. They understand when I put up the screen capture of Google, when you go to usas.ca on a web search and it's blacklisted and say we publish malware, they understand that. So what I've turned myself into is a metrics machine, and I don't try to get the glaze over. I put it in business terms, in terms of university reputation. Now, I'm very fortunate because in my life's journey, I went to business school and got an MBA. So what I've ended up doing is taking a lot of that marketing, directed marketing training, and I'm using it to argue the business case of security. So I avoid getting into this glaze over effect by showing them actual examples. And you know what? They eat it up. I have a presentation that I gave to the Academic Planning and Priorities Committee, and that's a subcommittee of Academic Council. First half of it were security incidents at U of S. They were salted, believe it or not. So we can get into the mathematics behind cracking them, but it's got to do with brute force. What the algorithm is here, we're brute forcing computing and matching the hash using rainbow tables. Salting does help. It's probably the reason we only got 87 of the 190, whatever it was, 1,000. Admin staff, I don't have the problem. People are now understanding that security is an issue, we have to address it. Provo asks lots of times for stats. He wants more stats, which is valid. But admin staff, sometimes the best successes have been when something happens. A I'll tell you another story. We had one of our principal service providers on campus. We found a 2010 Trojan that was left behind, and they had to go down for 48 to 72 hours to rebuild. My best people talking about it were the people that worked all that weekend to rebuild it. It only takes a few good examples. It's a horrible way to win the argument. It's very difficult to win the argument that on the security return on investment, by the way. If you get yourself sucked into arguing that you're to save money, you're not going to win it. What does work is prevention. You know, how much effort does it take to prevent something happening versus recovery from it? Is Eric here? No, I can't. I don't want to pick on you, Vic, but they went through a horrendous compromise about 3 years ago now, where they had a USB key stolen. The recovery of that really opened a lot of people's eyes to the potential damage, and they were very lucky. And in that particular case, there's www.uvic.ca/data breach. It's worth the read. Because, by the way, folks, it's not if it happens, it's when. And the thing is now, I'm starting to see social engineering go rampant, especially from overprotective parents that want to see their kids' grades. And that's actually causing a major cultural collision because the parents think they have the right. And they get very upset when we say, no, they don't have the right, especially when they're non-Canadian. So there's a growing sense of awareness. You can't but read the paper. You know, that's why the job is getting easier. Depending on where you are on this awareness campaign, I'm very, very lucky. I've got at the director level a lot of people that, yay, we're going somewhere, and the realization by the provo that it's important. I've got a CIO that's phenomenally supportive. And without that, it would be much more difficult. But the thing is, and this is, I do not try to sell a technology solution, I sell a business solution. And that's, you know, when I now have a faculty potentially losing their research grant because they don't meet the grantor's security requirements. It's amazing how faculty follows into line. Or I have a social science researcher that has data that they have to safeguard their research site because they could lose a longitudinal survey that they're well into and they don't want to lose it. You know, you have to talk about what's important. It's just like when I make this risk decision. Really what I'm telling is what's important to you, what's critical to you, you safeguard that. Sorry, I'm getting on my soapbox, but I mean. Questions? Come on, folks.
Back to that webcam, someone turning that on behind your back.
Yeah.
What do you do with the microphone? That's good.
Same thing. We have, there's actually, I know some people that are a bit paranoid about the microphone. They actually turn it off in BIOS. I know someone else that took a microphone plug, you know, cut the wires off and they just plug it in.
Oh, so that overrides it.
Yeah, so in other words, it goes to what's plugged in, but there's no microphone, so.
Okay, so the ability to have this external microphone is something in other words.
Yeah.
That's not Joe.
Yeah, well, but you raise a good question. Eavesdropping the audio channel. Does anyone remember a cult of the? I'll make sure I'll get to you. The cult of the black cow, cult of the dull cow, where they.
Nobody remembers it.
For those that don't, they actually had some malware that took over your machine, and you could actually do things like eject CD-ROM drive door and other amazing things. They had the audio thing so you could listen to the people.
The whole they used to oust people, the other hosts / staff microphone.
Yeah.
That was.
Yeah.
And / staff speaker.
Exactly.
I'm just not getting in the way of the new Google services that they're offering, where they're monitoring their
Well, you see, that's the business case, but that's the business case. You know, if vendors properly put security safeguards in place, and some are, certain things like this can be stopped, but it takes a bit of, and it takes time. Hey, I spent 10 years at Nortel. I watched security safeguards get pulled out of the product development cycle. And I thought they were taking mega risks, but it's a fact of doing business. You got to get product to market. So that means you as the consumer get to make the decision. Aaron?
The question that I had was, how much longer do you think passwords are even going to be relevant at this point, given the acceleration on GPUs and how many billions of bits per second they can use?
30 characters.
Yeah, as if you're not going to let them down. Put it this way, if I didn't have my password tool, I couldn't remember them that long. Maybe I'm getting too old, but I love two-factor. I love the fact I've got that little generator, 2 generators on my soft phone that I can generate, I log in with my username and password, I get asked to key the thing in. I wish the smartphone vendors would stabilize on near-field communications, and the laptop vendors would actually have a receiver so I could just hold it down. That's something I have, I can get into some multiple two-factor things. I wish someone would build a secure virtual knee on the net, but I give it 18 months. But no, it won't go away, and passwords are here forever. Just like the people who call me up and say, hey, what crypto should I use to encrypt the password file on my app? Well, why are you writing a crypto algorithm in your app to encrypt passwords? We offer a university-wide single sign-on. Why aren't you calling the service? Or maybe the device you're on has got a good one. And what I think it comes down to our security awareness, and I think this is where we're being, even the fact that my position exists at the University of Saskatchewan is amazing, because they understood that they needed a centralized lightning rod for issues in security, because we just have so many. I mean, we've got the Canadian Light Source, we've got Invito, with real people viruses. We have all these second parties and what we call our subsidiaries and allied agencies. And it all runs on information. I have a friend that used to say it all runs on Steam. Well, I'm beginning to convince that universities all run on information. And actually, we all do ourselves personally.